For most people, April 26, 1986 began like any other spring day. Families were asleep, the streets were quiet, and the city of Pripyat was preparing for another ordinary morning. Children would soon head to school, workers would leave for their jobs, and life would continue as it always had. No one knew that within hours, their city would become one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Just a few kilometers away stood the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, one of the Soviet Union's largest nuclear facilities. It was considered a symbol of technological progress and national pride. Thousands of engineers, technicians, and operators worked there every day, supplying electricity to millions of people. On the night of April 25th, the staff inside Reactor No. 4 prepared for what seemed like a routine safety experiment. The purpose of the test was simple. Engineers wanted to find out whether the spinning turbine could continue generating enough electricity for a short period after a power failure, giving emergency systems enough time to activate. Similar tests had been attempted before, but this one would be different. As the evening progressed, the reactor's power level was gradually reduced. However, unexpected delays forced the operators to keep the reactor running much longer than planned. By the time permission was finally given to continue the test, the night shift had taken over. Many of the experienced engineers were no longer in the control room. The team now faced increasing pressure to complete the experiment. During the power reduction, the reactor's output suddenly dropped much lower than expected. Instead of stopping the test, the operators tried to recover the reactor's power. To do this, they manually withdrew a large number of control rods, far more than safety procedures normally allowed. At the same time, several automatic protection systems were disabled to prevent the reactor from shutting itself down. The reactor was now operating in an unstable condition. Inside the core, enormous amounts of energy were becoming increasingly difficult to control. Yet from the outside, everything appeared calm. The control room remained quiet. The instruments continued to display numbers. No alarms suggested that history was only minutes away from changing forever. At exactly 1:23 a.m., the operators began the final stage of the experiment. Within seconds, reactor power increased uncontrollably. The crew tried to stop the reaction by pressing the emergency shutdown button. It was the last action they believed would save the reactor. Instead, it triggered one of the deadliest technological disasters in human history. A massive steam explosion tore through Reactor No. 4. The force blew apart the 1,000-ton concrete and steel cover, protecting the reactor. Moments later, a second explosion sent burning graphite and radioactive debris high into the night sky. The nuclear core was now completely exposed. For the first time in history, an operating nuclear reactor was burning in the open air. Few people understood what they had just witnessed. Some believed it was simply an industrial accident. Others thought the reactor itself could never explode. They were all wrong. The invisible cloud rising above the plant carried enormous amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The wind would soon transport it across Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and eventually much of Europe. But in those first few minutes, no one outside the power plant knew what had truly happened. Inside the power plant, confusion spread almost instantly. The explosion had shattered windows, collapsed sections of the building, and cut off communication between different parts of the facility. Dust filled the air, emergency lights flickered, and many workers struggled to understand what had happened. Several operators insisted that the reactor itself could not have exploded. According to everything they had been taught, such a failure was considered impossible. Believing the core was still intact, supervisors ordered workers to inspect the damaged reactor building. Many of them walked directly into areas where radiation levels were thousands of times higher than normal. They had no idea that every minute spent there was exposing them to potentially fatal doses of radiation. Outside, pieces of burning graphite lay scattered across the ground. Some workers picked them up with their bare hands, unaware that the black fragments had come directly from the reactor core. Within moments, many began experiencing an unusual metallic taste in their mouths. Others complained of intense headaches, dizziness, and burning sensations on their skin. None of them realized these were the first signs of acute radiation exposure. Meanwhile, the first emergency calls reached the local fire department. Firefighters were told only that there had been a fire at the power plant. No one warned them about radiation. No one told them that the smoke rising into the night carried invisible particles capable of causing devastating damage to the human body. The first fire crews arrived within minutes. Without specialized protective equipment, they climbed onto rooftops and began battling flames spreading across the damaged buildings. Their mission was simple: prevent the fire from reaching the remaining reactors. Working under impossible conditions, they dragged heavy hoses across burning rooftops while radioactive debris surrounded them. Every breath they took increased their exposure. Every minute they remained on the scene placed their lives at even greater risk. Yet they continued. Many believed they were responding to an ordinary industrial fire. Some would remain at the reactor for hours before being replaced. By sunrise, several firefighters could barely stand. Their skin had turned red. Many were vomiting repeatedly, and extreme exhaustion overwhelmed them. Most were rushed to hospitals in Pripyat and later transferred to specialized medical facilities in Moscow. Doctors initially struggled to understand the severity of their condition. Radiation poisoning on this scale had almost never been seen before. While emergency crews fought to contain the disaster, life in the nearby city of Pripyat continued almost normally. Children played outside. Families walked through parks. People opened their windows to enjoy the unusually warm spring weather. From certain parts of the city, residents could even see a strange blue glow above the damaged reactor. Some gathered on bridges and balconies to watch the distant fire, unaware they were exposing themselves to radioactive fallout drifting through the air. There were no public warnings. Schools remained open. Buses continued running. Shops welcomed customers as they always had. For nearly 36 hours after the explosion, more than 40,000 residents carried on with their daily lives, completely unaware that invisible radiation surrounded them. The silence was almost as dangerous as the explosion itself. By the time officials finally acknowledged the scale of the disaster, thousands of people had already received significant radiation exposure. The decision to delay evacuation would become one of the most controversial moments in the history of the Chernobyl disaster. By the afternoon of April 26th, Soviet officials could no longer ignore the growing crisis. Radiation levels around the power plant continued to rise. Yet the people of Pripyat had still not been told the truth. Children played in parks beneath the sky carrying invisible radioactive particles. Families spent time outdoors, completely unaware that every passing hour increased their exposure. Inside government offices, Difficult decisions were being made. Admitting the scale of the disaster meant acknowledging that one of the Soviet Union's most advanced nuclear reactors had suffered a catastrophic failure. For many officials, that was almost unthinkable. As valuable hours slipped away, radiation continued spreading across the region. Finally, nearly 36 hours after the explosion, authorities ordered the evacuation of Pripyat. On the afternoon of April 27th, hundreds of buses entered the city. Residents were instructed to bring only essential documents, a few personal belongings, and enough supplies for several days. Officials assured everyone that the evacuation was temporary. They would return home in a few days. Believing those promises, many families locked their apartment doors for what they thought would be a short absence. Meals remained on kitchen tables. Photographs stayed on the walls. Favorite toys were left behind in children's bedrooms. Pets wandered through empty apartments after their owners departed. Few realized they were leaving forever. Within just a few hours, nearly 50,000 people had disappeared from the streets of Pripyat. The once vibrant city fell completely silent. Apartment buildings stood untouched. Schools, hospitals, amusement parks, and public squares remained exactly as they had been on the day of the evacuation. Nature slowly reclaimed what people had abandoned. Trees pushed through cracked pavement. Wild animals returned to areas once crowded with human life. Pripyat became a frozen moment in history. But while the city was empty, the disaster was far from over. The radioactive plume rising from Reactor No. 4 continued drifting across Europe. At first, the Soviet Union released almost no information to the outside world. The disaster might have remained hidden even longer if not for an unexpected discovery hundreds of kilometers away. On the morning of April 28th, workers at the Forsmark Nuclear Power Plant in Sweden detected unusually high radiation levels. At first, they feared a leak at their own facility. After extensive inspections found nothing wrong, scientists realized the contamination had arrived from somewhere else. Air currents were carrying radioactive particles across national borders. Soon, similar readings appeared in Finland, Norway, Germany, Poland, and several other European countries. The evidence became impossible to deny. Only then did Soviet authorities publicly acknowledge that a serious accident had occurred at Chernobyl. Even so, the full extent of the disaster remained unclear. Back at the reactor, conditions were becoming even more dangerous. The exposed core continued releasing heat and radioactive material into the atmosphere. Engineers feared another explosion could occur if molten nuclear fuel reached water beneath the reactor. Such an event might have contaminated an even larger portion of Europe. Stopping the disaster required an enormous human effort. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, engineers, miners, construction workers, pilots, and volunteers would eventually take part in the cleanup operation. They became known as the Liquidators. Many accepted assignments without fully understanding the risks. Others volunteered despite knowing exactly what radiation could do. Military helicopters flew directly above the burning reactor, dropping thousands of tons of sand, lead, clay, and boron in an attempt to smother the fire and reduce radioactive emissions. Each flight exposed pilots to dangerous radiation. Flying too low increased exposure. Flying too high reduced the accuracy of the drops. Every mission demanded extraordinary precision and courage. Elsewhere, teams of miners were ordered to dig a tunnel beneath the damaged reactor. Working in extreme heat, They hoped to construct a cooling system that could prevent molten fuel from reaching groundwater. Conditions underground were exhausting. Temperatures became unbearable. Ventilation was limited, and progress depended entirely on manual labor. Many workers removed heavy protective clothing simply to continue digging. Above ground, another challenge emerged. Highly radioactive graphite fragments still covered the rooftops surrounding Reactor No. 4. The radiation was so intense that even specially designed robots quickly failed after entering the area. Their electronic systems stopped working within minutes. With machines unable to complete the task, people were sent instead. Small groups of soldiers climbed onto the rooftops for only seconds at a time. Their orders were simple: run onto the roof, shovel as much radioactive debris as possible back into the reactor, leave immediately. Each mission lasted less than 2 minutes. Even that brief exposure delivered significant doses of radiation. Despite the danger, thousands completed these missions. Without their efforts, constructing a permanent cover over the destroyed reactor would have been nearly impossible. Their work remains one of the most extraordinary examples of human sacrifice during the disaster. By the end of 1986, engineers completed a massive concrete and steel structure around Reactor No. 4, known as the sarcophagus. It was built under incredibly difficult conditions to contain the remaining radioactive material. Although constructed in just a few months, it was never intended to be a permanent solution. The danger beneath it had not disappeared. It had only been sealed away. Although the first emergency had finally come under control, the Chernobyl disaster was far from over. Beneath the massive concrete shelter, the remains of Reactor No. 4 continued to pose a serious challenge. The structure had been built under extreme conditions and at remarkable speed. While it reduced the release of radioactive material, engineers knew it would not last forever. For years, scientists carefully monitored the damaged reactor, searching for cracks, signs of corrosion, and potential structural weaknesses. Decades later, an even larger project began. In 2016, a gigantic steel structure, known as the new safe confinement, was carefully moved into position over the original sarcophagus, weighing more than 30,000 tons and standing over 100 meters tall. It became one of the largest movable structures ever built. Its purpose was not to erase the disaster, but to contain it for future generations, while allowing engineers to safely dismantle the unstable remains of the reactor. Even today, the work is far from finished. The radioactive materials inside the reactor will remain hazardous for many years, and careful monitoring continues around the site. Beyond the power plant itself, the disaster left deep scars on human lives. In the weeks following the explosion, dozens of plant workers and firefighters died from acute radiation syndrome after receiving extremely high doses of radiation. Thousands of others were exposed to lower levels over the following months and years. Determining the total number of deaths linked to Chernobyl has remained one of the most difficult questions for scientists. Some health effects appeared quickly. Others developed years or even decades later. Researchers continue to study the long-term impact of radiation exposure, particularly among cleanup workers and people who lived in contaminated regions. One of the clearest health consequences was a significant increase in thyroid cancer among individuals who were children at the time of the accident, largely due to exposure to radioactive iodine. Fortunately, many of these cases were successfully treated thanks to advances in medical care and early diagnosis. The environmental consequences were equally dramatic. Large areas surrounding the reactor became heavily contaminated, a restricted zone extending roughly 30 kilometers around the power plant was established. Entire villages were abandoned. Forests, rivers, and farmland were left behind. For many years, people believed the exclusion zone would remain lifeless. Instead, something unexpected happened. With humans gone, nature slowly returned. Wolves, elk, wild boar, lynx, foxes, and hundreds of bird species gradually repopulated the region. Scientists continue to study this unusual environment, where wildlife has adapted despite the presence of radioactive contamination. Chernobyl remains one of the most remarkable examples of nature, reclaiming places once dominated by people. Today, the abandoned city of Pripyat still stands. Its apartment buildings remain empty. Classrooms are frozen in time. Rusting amusement rides have become symbols recognized around the world. Every abandoned room tells the story of families who believed they would return only a few days later. They never did. The Chernobyl disaster transformed the way the world viewed nuclear safety. Countries introduced stricter regulations, redesigned reactor systems, and strengthened international cooperation to prevent similar accidents from happening again. The lessons learned in 1986 continue to influence nuclear engineering today. More than 4 decades have passed since that spring night. Yet Chernobyl is remembered not only because of the explosion itself, but because it revealed how dangerous human error, poor communication, and delayed decisions can become when combined with powerful technology. The abandoned streets of Pripyat still remind us that some disasters do not end when the fire is extinguished. Their consequences can last for generations. Chernobyl is more than a historical event. It is a warning. A reminder that even the greatest technological achievements demand responsibility, transparency, and constant respect for the risks they carry. As time moves forward, the silence surrounding Reactor No. 4 continues to speak louder than words. Its story is not only about the past, it is a lesson for the future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, consider subscribing for more in-depth stories exploring history's most remarkable events. See you in the next documentary.